Hello and welcome to EmpowHER, the program that spotlights women who are breaking barriers and driving progress. I am your host, Sharna J, and we are joined by a passionate storyteller and social impact advocate whose work is changing the way African story are being told. She is the founder and portfolio director of Shades of Us, a media platform that uses storytelling to shed light on issues affecting women, children, people with disabilities, and other marginalized groups across the continent. Now, with a strong background in radio, television, and digital media, she uses her voice and creative skills to promote the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, from ending poverty and hunger to advancing education and climate action. Now let's make welcome Ramatu Ada Ochekliye.
Thank you.
It's good to have you in the studio.
Thank you for having
Ramatu.
me. I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah. Ramatu, it's interesting to know that you've worked across radio, television, and digital media. Now tell us, what inspired you to start Shades of Us?
Okay, it all started, and it's a long story. It takes me all the way to when I was 8 years old. I think that was the first time I started to see things and understand things that were happening in our community. So when I saw abuse in our society, I was unhappy. I was sad. I saw some things that happened among couples, things that happened in the community generally, how parents interacted with children, how adults interacted with children, and it just didn't sit right with me. It felt weird because we grew up in a relatively conservative community. So the idea should have been that because this was relatively normal in my community, it shouldn't have been weird to me, but it was weird and I just didn't like it. And so one thing that started, I had a teacher who taught us about human rights, especially when we had a crisis in Kaduna State. And so she was teaching us how to respect people, respect each other, so that we didn't, carry on the bitterness. That was the first thing that set in me that, okay, we needed to understand that every human being mattered. Every human being was important. Every human being needed to be respected. And that set a fire in me that I started to carry along with me, just basically saying, oh, people matter, people should be respected and all of that. So it started for me when I was 8 years old, looking at my community, looking at a lot of things that happened in where I was living in Kaduna State, and then having that teacher tell us that every human being was important. And over time, I started to do simple things, plays. I think I was 9 years old when I had my first play. Wow. And so we had that play and our school came second. And I was like, okay, maybe this is something I needed to do. But all the time I always thought I wanted to be a doctor. So in fact, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon and all of that. And I said, okay, this is who I want to be. I wasn't following through as much, but I was still, actively speaking up for people. If someone is maybe in the community, someone is trying to fight among friends. And as young as I was then, I just had this feeling that certain things were just not right. And I started to speak up for people. And then I got into the secondary school and I was an athlete to an extent. I wasn't very good at it, but I loved all kinds of sports. And I kept hearing, oh, girls shouldn't play sports. If you play sports, you're going to become manly. And for some reason, I was like, no, I love sports. And every girl around me, we started to play sports. And I was encouraging girls to play sports, so much so that because I knew I wasn't so good at sports, I started coaching people and we were winning games. And all of a sudden I realized, there was something I could do. I was inspiring girls to stay in sports. And then by the time I got to the university, by this point, I had done like church dramas, church plays, hosted theater nights and all of that. And I realized, storytelling is my thing. But I was studying biochemistry. So at that point, it was like, am I wasting my time? So I got lost a little bit, stayed doing my biochemistry. I didn't do a lot of storytelling except writing about my thoughts on social media. Facebook had just become a thing at that time. And so I was just writing all of my thoughts. What I used to write in notebooks before, I started to write on Facebook. And then by the time I went to serve, when I first got the idea, you're going to Adamawa State. I was like, Adamawa State? I'd never been anywhere. So I said, okay, let me go to Adamawa State and be there. And I would always mention the key people who were very instrumental. I had a leader in church. He was a leader of the unit I was in. And he told me, Ramat, I want you to be on radio. for a program, and I was like, oh my God, I don't have clothes to wear. It's like, it's radio, nobody sees you. So his name is Frama Ambrose, and he came, picked me up, went to the radio house, and it was while I was there talking on radio, I found myself. Like that moment, just talking. I was like, this is what I want to do. I felt so alive. And I was just regular. And then somebody from the radio stations came and said, oh, Ramat, I think you should come and anchor some shows. And I was like, ooh, it seems the universe is, aligning with me. And somebody else, again, the person who said, come and anchor the show, Madam Chika. And then we had another person, Charles. He was a production person. And he said, I checked you out on Facebook and I see what you're writing. So how about you do a blog? I was like, blog? Can I really do this? Like, and then in my mind, I was just thinking, oh, the bloggers were like Linda Ikeji, Bella Ninja. Was there any hope for someone like me? But I said, okay, you know what? Let me try it. So I went on the computer at the radio station I worked at. I started typing, how do you manage a blog? And I started. But it didn't start out as Shades of Us.
Oh.
It started out as Shades of Brown.
Okay.
I always knew I wanted to talk about people who looked like me because I'd been inspired by a lot of women, Oprah, Beyonce, all of that. And there were women that I saw were telling stories about us, people who looked like us. And there was this show that was on TV at that time, Generations, from South Africa. And they had women who were plus size, Afro, dark skinned. And I was like, this is revolutionary. I think, and all of these things together made me realize, I could tell stories about us too. And so we started with Shades of Brown, and then in trying to register the name, I realized there were 1,000 shades of brown on Pinterest. At that time, it used to be a big thing. And a brown could be some food page or some fashion page or something. So I sat down, took a step back, and I said, what do I need to do? So I thought about it. I want the idea of shades because I want to talk about all shades of people who look like me, that is Africans and people of African descent. But then if I was dropping the brown, which connoted our skin color, what was I going to do? Then I now said, okay. And it just came to me, Shades of Us.
Interesting.
And the moment it just came into my head, Shades of Us, I was like, yes, this is the name. So I changed everything and it became Shades of Us. And we officially started working April 7th, 2013, even though we didn't get fully registered until 2022.
Interesting.
Thank
Quite
you.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk about your social impact focus. Now, your work focuses on a lot of social issues affecting women, children, marginalized group, and all of that. Now, what drives your passion for these causes?
Okay, so it goes back again to me understanding my community when I was 8, right? It just didn't sit right with me to see women being abused. We had neighbors who the husband could beat up his wife and push her out of the house, right? Even in my family situation, we had, things that were considered normal that I looked and I was like, this cannot possibly be normal, right? My parents had from my parents, from my family. And so all of these things together was bearing heavily on me. And my mom will never accept it, but my mom is one of the first people who made me realize things can be different, right? She told me, look, I'm in a situation with your father. I can't stay here. I want to leave. She spoke to me. I was young. I was 10, almost getting to 11. She said, I want to leave. And I said, Mommy, leave. And everyone was surprised. Why are you telling your mom to leave? People, this is normal. Men can do this. And then after a while, they become better. And I told my mom, no, Mommy, this is not right. You should leave. And when I was 11 years old, she left. And I respected my mom from that day so much because she showed that you could walk away from a situation that was really bad for you. So over time, it started to stay with me. I looked at women who were in abusive situations. Again, I mentioned someone who beat up his wife and pushed her out naked. And it was normal. And she was one of the women who was saying, no, your mother should not leave. I was like, you should leave. You're in a bad situation. Is it until you die before, so I started to tell people, teenagers, when you have your teenage love and then somebody's doing something, no, this isn't right. And that's how my things around women and girls started to happen. And then I started to research some of the things that were affecting women. Women going to give birth and dying, because I saw this in my community, or giving birth and their children dying, or seeing that women were shamed in the community for being single mothers, or seeing children who couldn't go to school. And then when I got to Yola, I served in a government girls secondary school. And I had a student, I will never forget her. I'm not going to mention her name, but this girl was 14 as at the time I was serving. And she came to class with excitement one day to tell us that she was getting married. And I was like, you're getting what? She was like, oh, Miss Ramat, because I always told them, don't call me auntie, I'm not related to you. Just call me Miss Ramat. And she was like, oh, Miss Ramat, I'm getting married. I'm like, you're getting married? And I was so hurt. I couldn't help her. I said, okay, who is this person? Is he your mate? Is he things like that? And she said, oh no, he's her father's friend. He's in his 50s, but he's going to give her her own house and he's rich and all of that. And I was so hurt, but I couldn't help her. Right. And then I saw again, while I was there, because I still played basketball at that time, I saw girls who played basketball, who couldn't afford shoes and all of that. And I just realized, if I just look around me, there's one problem or the other that is happening to women, to girls, to people with disabilities, especially so, and then to other, marginalized groups, whether it's by tribe, whether it's by religion. And so I began to really connect to my environment and connect to people in my environment and ask, can things not be better? So at first it started with just the individual, trying to help the individual in my way. But over time, we have grown to understand that we cannot just help the individual. When you understand the behavioral drivers of life, you understand that there are things that happen at the individual level, at the family level, at the community level, at the government level, which is the systemic level. And so we started to do some advocacy to address people at all of these levels, the individual, the family, the community, the system, and the government. And it became a thing where I looked around us. If it's at the government level, there are systems that allow abuse to happen. If it's at the community level, there are things that certain communities that don't allow the individual. There are communities where you go to and you can't dress the way you want to dress. You have to dress to fit what the community thinks. And so my idea was, first, every human being needs to be respected. Coming back to that teacher of mine, right? Second, that women were as important as other members of society. So women, girls, people with disability, we were as important as other members of society. So when I knew about equal rights and equality as a whole, I said, okay, how can we address the areas that prevent us from being equal? And not just equal in the sense of rights, but equals in the sense of roles in terms of community development and responsibilities as human beings to ourselves. And so these were the things that led me to the point of saying, oh, let us re-strategize shades of us. Let us use storytelling, which has always been our thing, but let us address the things based on the behavioral drivers, which are drivers around the individual, the family, the community, the systems, and then the government.
Interesting. Now, let's even talk about the storytelling part. You've used radio, TV, and now currently using digital media. Now, kindly tell us, how has digital media changed the way storytelling is being told in Africa?
Digital media, I would always say, is one of the best things that has happened. I know a lot of people are of the belief that digital media, especially social media, has caused more harm than good, but I beg to differ. I always say that communication has always existed. And when I do trainings on communication, I go all the way back. I say the first communication started with two people talking to each other. The next thing was they probably had a town crier. Then from a town crier, they had, letters first. Yeah. When we're writing from our using the golden pen to write in our golden. I know a certain generation who will hear this and be like, oh yes, I remember that, right? Writing letters. Then we had radio. Then we had television. And the humanity would always expand because of one thing, communication. So digital media is just a platform, but it has been an important platform because for the longest time, people thought that they lived in isolation. So, for example, if you live in a community where people drink water from the stream without boiling it, that's all you know, right? But with digital media, you might hear that, oh, drinking water from the stream may be good in one way, but it could also carry some bacteria and what have you. So it allows you to illuminate your mind and to take better care of yourself. People always say things like, oh, our parents didn't take modern medicine and they lived very long. That's not true. If you read through history, you see that lots of people were dying. It's only a few out of the people who were giving birth to that were staying alive. It's why we have indices under like WHO, where you are saying children under 5, because at a point children under 5 were dying very, very much. It's why they're addressing things like maternal mortality, because a lot of women were dying because they were giving birth. So when I looked at it, I said, okay, how can we use digital media? Surprisingly, I say this with a bit of more respect now. I always used to tell people, oh, I'm the one addict that used her addiction to get a job. But I was addicted to social media. Literally would, where you're waking up and you're using your hand to find, and then you find your phone and you go, and then you're sleeping and the phone falls on your head. That was me. But it made me learn about digital media. And as I learned digital media and learned communication strategies and learned about the behaviors of people, I realized that, oh, this is such an important tool for social change. Let me give you an example. Years ago, when we had Ebola breakout, before even COVID, when Ebola broke out in Nigeria, the first case, we had people who sent messages and said, oh, you need to drink salt water, bathe with salt water, do all of this. And how did that spread? On WhatsApp. In fact, we have a thing where we say WhatsApp aunties, send this message to WhatsApp aunties, because there is a power that happens from sending information quickly. So if people who have bad intentions can send information quickly using social media, it then means that we should adapt and also send good information quickly so that we can either counteract bad information or give people hope, right? And so that's why I chose digital media mostly. I started to share blog posts. I could reach people across the world. When we first started our podcast and I checked our audience, I was seeing audience in Russia, in the United States. I was like, me, a tiny person here at that point living in Kaduna or living in Abuja, and somebody across the world can hear the things that we're doing. So it became very important to use. But then we also realized that digital media and there's a switch that's happened in the last couple of years. In the past, you could have good messages being shared. And if someone shared bad messages, you just needed to report them and they could bring it down. But because of the push for a new kind of narrative, many platforms are allowing in fact, the worse the message is, the bigger the traction. So we also need to quickly move, because if we don't do the same thing, what's going to happen is people will be consuming things that destroy them, and it really does destroy. It's why you see that with Rwanda, what happened on radio, they were calling one tribe cockroaches. And what happened? It went from hearing them being called cockroaches to a point where they attacked them, and there was a genocide where nearly 3 to 6 million people died, right? Yeah. So we do need to know how can we use digital media to counteract negative stereotypes about us, which is why we decided, okay, let's use blogs, let's use podcasts, let's use films, different kinds of videos. I even have this piece to come. I don't know how to say it in another way, but I'm talking about the socio-economic issues that affect us. And that's one way to use storytelling, because it is quick. Because again, by the time you need to edit this, it will take you time to edit, it will take you time to upload, probably days, right? So imagine somebody who has sent out really terrible message, but he went live rather than just, a video, just went live and started saying certain things. It can cause a lot of problems. So digital media for us was, how can we use storytelling quickly? How can we put out things that can counteract bad information quickly? Which is why we are very active across social media. We are active across the digital media platforms. And now we have a lot of in-person sessions to augment what we're doing digitally.
Quite remarkable, Ramatu. Quite remarkable. I have another question. But before we dive right into that question, we'll be going on a short break, and when we return, EmpowHER continues. Welcome back. If you are just tuning in, this is EmpowHER. And of course, I'm with Ramatu, the founder of Shades of Us. Now, Ramatu, you basically do two works. You are a creative and you also are a social impact advocate. Now, how do you balance both?
Oh, it is hard. It is hard because we have 6 films that we have made through our mobile cinema project. It's a project that allows us make films with the community, screen them together, and then go to other communities and show them as we try to improve social issues, right? So we have made 6 films. The first 4 films we had to make by ourselves. And when I made, one of the films, because I'm the kind of person that will write from where I am. So it was easy for me to write, and then I'm speaking English and I'm dropping some words. And, if I send it to the university, people will understand it and they'll connect. But if I send it to the community, it will fly over their heads, especially a community that's not properly educated. So we had to re-strategize and say, look, as much as we want to be creatives in telling our story, we also want our community to connect to the stories that we tell. So that's what we decided we need to first co-create with our communities. So what we do with our mobile cinema project is we have a script development workshop. We'll go to a community, say, okay, what are the issues you want to address, for example? And the last script development workshop we had, what came out was emotional abuse, right? Emotional abuse in intimate partner and intimate partner violence. And so we said, okay, let's look at emotional. How can we tell this story? And then we bring it up, and then we brainstorm, everybody brings their ideas, and then we put it up on the wall and say, which ideas are we dropping and all of that? And then we co-create a story. It's hard for me to do that because I'm the type who wants to run with my idea. But if you want to sustain storytelling, which is what we want to do with Shades of Us, we want to be able to tell stories, but not just tell from ourselves, but to have as many people telling our stories in a way that changes the perspective that we have. So if we knew that if we wanted to do this, we must work with communities. And that's why we did that we re-strategized and we started getting communities in. But it's not just the script development, even in the production, like the film we made called Flow, it addresses period poverty. We actually went to the community and actually got actors from the community we're trying to address. If we see that there's hope that you can act, you'll be a part of that production, which allowed ownership of the project. I remember a pharmacist that we walked up to and we're like, oh, we want this is what we're doing and whatever. And he was like, oh, okay, I want to be a part of this process. In fact, one man while we were shooting an exterior scene came and said, see, I'm an actor. This is my community, And we were like, how can we get him into the scene without throwing off what we had planned? And we just easily slid him in without affecting the story, right? And this man instantly became a fan and was, following through. And then when we are done, we do a community screening. For Flow, we were even able to get girls from internally displaced people's camps, right? Through our partnerships with organizations like Stand With a Girl and Strong Enough Girl Initiative. So we were able to bring people from internally displaced camps to come and watch. And the film was basically addressing period poverty, but not just the poverty, the shame. The idea that someone who was stained can understand that it's normal. People get stained. Even adults get stained, right? And so we get people to do it. And when I saw people engage with the story differently from if I'd written it from a highfalutin point, or maybe like a 40-year-old career woman who, the difference in the way people connected was good. So what we do is we realize that there are different audiences for different kinds of product. So there are things that we will do from a purely creative perspective. Like the next film that we have, and maybe you'll be one of the first people who hears about it, is called Sometimes the Red Flag is Pink. And in that film, we are going to do it from a very, very creative point of view, because we want a bigger audience. So for festivals, for example, university students and what have you. So we know they will understand the nuances, the creative direction of things. But when it's time to shoot a film about maternal mortality, for example, that we have done, a film called Umi, we will go to the community and we'll make the story like when we're doing Umi and Flo, they said, use Hausa because we're shooting in a community where they were mostly Hausa speaking. And a time will come, we'll go and shoot in the Yoruba speaking. In fact, I have a film in my head that we'll go and do in Benue State, and we will speak Idoma in the film. And so balancing it is knowing the audience you want to reach and the message you want to pass. So there are certain audiences that if I give them something that's heavy, if it's in the likes of King of Boys or what have you, they will understand it and understand it well. And then if there's an audience where education might not be very high up, you do it in their language, right? And they would understand it. So the balance for me is, what is the story we want to tell? But more importantly, who do we want to tell it to? So that's where we get our balance. And then when we determine these two, we're able to tell our stories very well.
Wow, Ramatu, you're doing quite a good job.
Thank you.
Let's talk about your goals. You align your work with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and that's quite interesting also. Which of the goals speaks to you, and why is that?
Also, we work on, surprisingly, 11 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The goals are so interlinked that for certain films, we might be working on 4 of these goals at a time. Let me use Flow, for example. Period poverty falls under Sustainable Development Goal 3, which is clean water and sanitation, right? It also addresses the idea of equality, because in that film, we talked about male involvement in periods, menstruation, and how men can be supportive. That's under equality. In reducing inequalities, because the film also addresses the idea that the downturn in Nigeria's economy is directly affecting how women can access sanitary products. So that's reducing inequality. And another thing that we address in that is clean water and sanitation, because women need to have clean water and sanitary products to be able to have their periods normally. That's a 4th. And the 5th one, because poverty, in the period poverty, is in trying to end, that's the no poverty, which is the first goal of the 17 goals. So it's linked. And then we brought in people who were working in these areas. We had women in Nigeria, I can't remember, for the life of me, I can't remember right now. Stand with a Girl, Strong Enough Girl Initiative. We even had a partnership with an organization in South Africa that produces reusable pads as an option to disposable pads. So in one film, we had 5 or 6 goals that were intertwined that we used to reflect in that film. And that's how we work. So when we are bringing out a story, the first thing we do from the idea is, what do we want to address? So sometimes is it poverty? Is it equality? Is it clean water and sanitation? Is it even partnerships? We also, hopefully next year, we're looking at doing a film around poverty and peace, justice, and strong institutions, especially around elections. So there are a lot of people doing similar things, and I'm happy when I see that, because it means that these are the stories that matter. And if all of us are telling stories to try to change the perspective of people, it means that we can act better. Let me give you something that has happened. I've become really enamored of Asia, towards China, Korea, Japan, and all of that, Singapore. And one thing I've learned from all of them is that for the longest time, people said, if China does anything for you, it's subpar. If you hear China product, in your mind, you subconsciously think this is subpar, right? But what did China do? China changed their narrative. If you go now, Google anything about China, everybody says China is living in 2050. Because they changed their narrative. So we also can change our narrative. Go outside, and the first thing you hear about Nigerians is that we are corrupt, that we are scammers, that we are bad people. And nobody talks about the fact that we are resilient people. Whether it's sports, whether it's business, no matter the sector you put a Nigerian in, we are resilient and we thrive. But people don't talk about that. All they talk about is, scam, Nigerian prince, and what have you. So how can we change this narrative, right? So the Sustainable Development Goals are not abstract. They are here with us, right? If the economy changes, poverty might increase. If you don't budget for education, people will suffer. If you don't allow women to participate in leadership and governance and the economy, we suffer. We'll be hopping on one leg because China, they don't have this man-woman thing. Everybody can participate in their government. Netherlands, New Zealand, have so many women participating in governance and what have you, and they're one of the best countries in terms of development indices in the world. So they are not high things. They're things that are right here with us. And for us, it's saying, how are we looking at this goal and looking at our lives and looking at the things that are happening around us, but are specific to us? Yeah. Because if you go to other countries, for example, you go to Jamaica, the things they deal with poverty. They deal with all of that. But it's not what Nigerians are dealing with, right? If you go to China, the same thing. If you go to South Korea, it's the same thing. But we have our things that are affecting us. So how can we align those things with the global goals?
Interesting. Well, this has been such an inspiring and insightful conversation, but we are wrapping up. I would like you to run through some challenges that you face, talking about or telling the stories of sensitive topics. And aside that, I know you don't just talk about, you don't just tell the story, you act on the media, you make a film out of it, right? And I believe that you don't just do it from anywhere. You sometimes go to those sensitive areas or communities to even shoot those films. So what are some challenges that you face doing all of that, talking about the topic and also shooting in some of those sensitive communities?
So I learned something very early on from my parents, which is to respect people. I'm from a blended family. You're probably one of the first people who didn't ask me the combination of my name. Like, it's so, there's Ramatu, there's Ada, there's Ochekliye. It's because we're from a blended family. We have Muslims in our family, Christians, people who are a-religious, and all of that. So early on, my parents taught us to respect everybody. And then when I met that teacher of ours who emphasized that everyone was equal, right? She died. She died years ago, but she built something in me that has stayed with me all of my life. I learned quickly to respect people. Now, when you see me go to a community in northern Nigeria, say Sokoto State now, in a town that is really small where we know that they are conservative Muslims, if you see me in that town, you see me with a hijab. Not because I'm trying to deceive anyone into thinking I am a Muslim, but because I know that it is respectful to them to come to them as they are, right? As they believe. If we go to communities, I used to have a day job where we were addressing maternal family health generally. And there was a community we went to and they cooked something with soya beans. I'm slightly allergic to soya beans. They cooked, it was a nutrition project, and they cooked something with soya beans, and they served all of us. And I saw some colleagues who were like, no, I don't want to eat. I don't know. It's not my thing. Da, da, da. And I said, give me plate and spoon. Give me my plate. Let me eat. And I was eating and I was gisting. There wasn't a break in my character. Even though I knew I had a slight allergy and I would struggle on my way out of that community. But do you know, till today, people from that community still call me Hajia Ramatu. And I'm like, I'm not even a Hajia, but they have already crowned me a Hajia. In fact, when leaving Sokoto State, I came back with so many things in my box than I traveled with because the women were giving me things because I respected their culture and their traditions. The same thing, if you see me in Osun State or your state, because I know that they wear a lot of Ankara. What do? I wear Ankara when I go there. And it's not just in the dressing, it's in the respect of people's culture. I don't go anywhere without researching how people behave, how they think, how they believe, because what I believe matters to me, but it also matters that I'm able to connect to people. And if you're not able to build trust, you're never going to get people to believe in what you're doing. So the biggest challenge that we have is in the trust. Because if I'm not able to build trust, people will never accept you. When I go to Ebonyi State, for example, you see me, I know that a lot of people wear jeans or skirts and what have you. That's how I dress. I talk to people. I eat what everybody eats. I behave how people behave. And it helps me build trust. But that does not mean that the challenges are not there. There are some people that regard this, they feel, oh, you're just coming to deceive us. And you can never convince them. And that is fine. That's what makes us the varying shades of us. You understand? Us having our beliefs. So we have the trust issue, which is something that we actively work to build. Another challenge is the insecurity now. It's a huge challenge because now I'm saying I want to go to Benue State to shoot a film. Imagine, what's happening in Benue right now, communities that are raised to the ground and all of that. When you want to shoot, you have to consider all of these things. Is it worth it to go and shoot? Or do you need to pay a huge amount to get security and what have you? Those are some of the things we look at. And then another thing we look at is generally people don't want to change their perspective. There's a physics term called inertia that says unless an external force is applied, most things will remain in the same spot. And that inertia is if an external force pushes me forward, my instinct is to move backward. It's why when you're driving and someone steps on the brake, what happens? You lean forward. It's a natural physics thing. So most people don't want to change their perspective because building your perspective about a thing actually takes time. It takes a lot of convincing. There's so many, again, when I teach around the behavioral drivers of people, I talk about how culture, how religion, how our community, how our families. So it's very hard to try to change someone's perspective. But if you build trust, if you respect them, if you understand how they act, why they act the way they do, if you eat with them, something as simple as eating with people can build trust. And then they will say, okay, maybe I can listen to you. Maybe I can change my perspective. And one thing I didn't learn quickly was I used to think, I had a superior idea. No. With all of my education and with all of the education we have, if you go to a community, they have the better knowledge because you don't walk in their shoes. You don't drink their water. You don't eat their food. So you don't know the things that make them who they are. So at that point, they have better information than you.
Yeah, definitely.
So when I learned that, I realized, learn, find out, talk, which is why we do a lot of research. What is the thing that pushes you? What is the thing that inspires you? Why do you eat this food? And that's where you understand that it's not that I like to eat rice. It's probably the only thing I can grow in my community. Or it's not that I don't want to eat meat. It's just that maybe meat, it takes too long to get to my community.
Definitely.
So there are lots of challenges and also funding. For Shades of Us, funding was for the longest time self-funded. It's hard because it's very, idealistic life I'm living where I want to change our perspective for a better world. But you can't do that running on the kind of funds that we have, right? So we do hope for better in the future and but we'll continue to do what we can from where we are at the moment. So there are many challenges, but mostly I like to focus on trust, the ability to change perspectives. The insecurity is such a bummer for me because it ties directly to everything we are doing. People are afraid to do road trips and all of that, and just go to the communities. It becomes really stressful, and then funding generally.
Thank you very much, Ramatu. So I'm going to run through a report, and I just want a comment, just in 1 minute, just a comment about that report. According to the United Nations report, in 2025, an estimated 808 million people will be living in extreme poverty, up from the previous estimate of 677 million, representing 9.9% of the world's population, or 1 in 10 people. Now, this is quite sad, and I will just, in a minute, just tell me, how can storytelling positively impact this result?
Well, I want to use China as an example. There was a time when the president went to the communities at the mountain edges. There are videos of this online where he sat down with the poorest of the people and he said, how can we improve? So he went there and he was telling stories. And before he left, he told them, as Chinese people, you are important. Your intellect is important. He was shaking people, bowing down to people. It might have been a political move, but what he was doing was telling them a story that was different from their reality. He was telling them that these things may be bad, but together we can improve. Together we can contribute. Together we can change our country. Guess what? China is the only country in the world that has lifted over 600 million people out of extreme poverty. In fact, 800 million people out of extreme poverty. Right now, they are the go-to that you look at and view for poverty. And what did they do? They changed the idea of who they were first, and they use stories to do that. Today, you go online, Google China, just Google any of their cities, whether it's Guangzhou, I don't even want to say Beijing or Hong Kong. Go to the other cities, they used storytelling. In fact, there are documentaries that they have where they are showing you how they make soybeans and all of that. And they told every member of their community that they were important. Imagine if we did the same thing here in Nigeria, across Africa, across places where we have Black people, and say, you know what, things are bad now, but how can we solve it together? And then tell people, you know, as a Nigerian, you are so important. How can we change the narrative? If we tell these stories, we'll begin to see ourselves differently. And when we see ourselves differently, 99 to 1, we may begin to act differently.
Thank you so much, Ramatu. We've had quite a timely conversation, and I love what shades of us, what you're doing, and I hope that you get to reach as much communities, reach the wide audience you want to get to, because this is what we're trying to push. A story that stories being told. African stories being told to push social impact. That's quite brilliant, and that's quite a good thing, I would say. It's quite a good thing. And thank you once again for sharing this knowledge of what you do with us. It was good having you in the studio.
I especially want to thank you for showing women who are doing important work. It's important that we show people who look like us. I mentioned the women in my life who I had seen doing something, and they made me, it sparked the desire to create change. And by doing this, you're also doing an amazing job by showing women who are doing amazing work. So thank you very much for this.
Yeah, thank you once again. Well, that's where we draw the line on Empower. I remain your host, Sharon Ajay. Until next time, see you again.